Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out more Jurassic World Dominion figures, but this time we have some Imaginext figures. Now these were recently found at a Walmart near me. I knew they were coming out, but I hadn't seen them in person until then, and since they were at Walmart and they weren't too expensive, they're around like the $8 range I think, I decided to grab them because I do enjoy the Imaginext figures from time to time. They're obviously very childish versions of dinosaurs, and they're meant to be because you can see right there with the age group for 3 to 8 years old, so that gives you a pretty good idea as to who they are trying to cater to when it comes to these releases. But I enjoy dinosaurs, and in some instances, we have prehistoric reptiles as well, but I enjoy prehistoric animals of any kind, whether it's goofy, childish versions or really highly detailed models. It makes no difference to me. I love them all. So I decided to pick these guys up because why not? And you can see that as far as the different species we have here, we have a Dimetrodon, an Atrociraptor, and a Pyro Raptor. And specifically the one that drew me in the most, I think, is the Pyro Raptor because I think he looks really cool. But you can also see that we have kind of like some really neat kind of like capture gear stuff here with them, which is something that I haven't really seen too much of in the Imaginext line. Like, I'm sure it's absolutely been in the line forever, but from the ones that I've purchased and, own in my collection, not too many of them have had the capture gear, so I'm intrigued to take a look at the capture gear, and definitely none of the ones that I've ever opened and actually reviewed here on the channel, which I think at this point is probably only like 3, but, again, I'm really, really excited to check these out because they look really neat. You do have the species title here on the side as well as far as the packaging goes, and then the back of the boxes kind of show off again the fact that you have an action feature and then tease you there with the capture gear as well, and all of the boxes are exactly the same. Again, you can see a Atrociraptor tiger, so we know which Atrociraptor we are looking at. You can again see the same thing with the action feature type ordeal going on, and then over here, I'm on the wrong side. There we go. We have the Pyro Raptor yet again, and then the back showing off again the action features. So we're going to go ahead, pop each of these open, and then take a look at them from there. So there we go. We have all of them out. We have all of them now in their capture gear, I think. I'm pretty sure the Atrociraptor is in it correctly. Can definitely say the Pyroraptor and Dimetrodon are, and the capture gear is actually really quite neat. Like, if you are a parent of a young child that is really into dinosaurs or Jurassic World specifically, these are really, really good options to go with because there's definitely a fun playability to them, and the sculpts are pretty fun, pretty adorable at the same time. And the Pyroraptor specifically, like, I really feel like kids will love that because the capture gear is super cool, and the sculpt at least has some pretty nice detail to it on top of, having the really cool paint job as well. But all of them honestly look really fun, so let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at these right now. So as you can see, we have this really cool capture gear on the Pyroraptor that kind of holds the arms as well as kind of encases the snout of the dinosaur to keep it still. But of course we can take that off. We just remove it, and it actually does have articulation. You can see it can open up and then of course again close on the snout of the dinosaur. It has actually a really cool metallic look to it as well, which is pretty fun. But the Pyroraptor itself, you can see, of course, has that childish type of a look, that kind of goofy look, but for the most part has some pretty fun detail. Of course, it's not detail like we'll see in the main Jurassic World line, but you can kind of make out like a look of feathers through the course of the body of the Pyroraptor, which definitely looks fun. I think they look pretty neat, and you can also see some beautiful, actually, feather detail down here on the arms, and I feel like the feathers look, a bit nicer than the feathers did on the recent basic Pyroraptor that I had reviewed because the feathers are just a little bit bigger, whereas the Pyroraptor from the basic line had a little bit smaller feathers. Still not, again, quite as nice as what we see on the Pyroraptor in the film, but it looks pretty cool. We do, of course, have pronated wrists, unfortunately, on the figure, but that's just something that happens at times, I guess. But you can see that we have a really cool glass eye effect for our Pyroraptor with a nice black pupil in there. You can see how the eye, of course, follows you, which I always love about that. And then you can see we also have an articulated jaw. The teeth are nicely sculpted, nicely painted. No real sloppiness in there, no other coloration for the inside of the mouth, unfortunately. You also have some feathers here kind of leading off of the back of the head, very much so like we see on the Pyroraptor in Jurassic World Dominion. And you can see we have a bit of different colors as we have an orange for the majority of the body, and then we have like a red-orange for the legs, as well as the arms, the tail feathers, well, actually the tail in general, and then the tail feathers, and then the feathers here on the back of the head. But you can see leading down into the feet, we do have a sickle claw that's just ever so slightly up off of the ground, more so than the other toes. And you can also see the toes in general have a pretty decent look to them. Bit of a gloss coat as well for the nails, which is nice to see. And then again, the tail looks pretty fun. Nice tail feathers out there. Articulation, we can articulate the tail pretty nicely. We can also articulate the legs. Very smooth. Of course, the arms as well. The jaw, like we already saw. And the neck, so quite a bit. And the articulation of the neck is actually also activated by this button, which I believe also helps to kind of break out of the capture gear, which we will check out very soon. Then we've got our Dimetrodon, and the Dimetrodon again has pretty generic looking capture gear, but again, pretty much what you would expect for a Dimetrodon. But you can see as you bring it up, first of all, the sail's fairly small right now, and that's because the action feature for this one extends the sail, so you have a button that just randomly pops the sail out. Not too sure why, but I guess it works pretty okay and is something that kids would probably enjoy. You can see on this one we actually have for some reason like a little ridge there on the nose, and I always felt like the Imaginext figures kind of look like babies of the different species they're meant to represent, and we know that, you know, sometimes babies would have like a little notch there on the nose to help break out of the egg, so maybe that's why that's there. I'm not too sure, but you can see again that we have an articulated jaw, just like we did with the Pyro Raptor. Some decent detail in there, but no real paintwork other than the same color of the light green that you have here for the underside. You can see the teeth look okay, all pretty nicely painted, and you can also see that we have some nice kind of bumpy scales through the course of the figure. Of course, the majority of the figure is kind of muted detail-wise, as you usually find when it comes to these Imaginext figures, but it does kind of have like a bumpy appearance through the course of the figure. We also have ridges running down along the tail, which I'm not a huge fan of. Decent muscle definition and everything displayed in the legs. You can see the feet are sculpted nicely, but we don't really have any nail paint. We do have a bit of a gloss coat, though, for the nails, which is a plus. And we have this really flashy orange coloration up here in the sail of the Dimetrodon, but you can see that the majority of the body is this nice tone of green, and we have that same green kind of leading out through the sail with the orange in between. You also have a really nice yellow eye, again, that kind of glass eye type effect where the eye can follow you. Nice black pupil. I really love that about these figures. I feel like it always amps up the realism, even though they're not very realistic, but kind of amps up the realism of the figures. And you have a nice light green for the underside that does end before we reach the tail. But as a whole, I think the Dimetrodon is fun. Not really as nice as the Pyro Raptor, but still okay. We do have articulation in the legs, all four legs, and then, of course, the jaw. I don't think there's any other articulation. It looks like there should be tail articulation, but I don't really see anything occurring there. And then, of course, the sail as well, where you can pop the sail out, which again would, you know, project the capture gear off of our Dimetrodon. And then the Atrociraptor, you can see we have this very interesting kind of capture gear, or I don't really know what you would call this because it's not really capture gear, it's a capture mechanism. You can see that we have a blue and then a nice silver for pretty much the entire thing. Again, just the blue in this area, but you can see there's like some scratch marks here on the side of it. Obviously, they've been using this quite a bit for different dinosaurs, and you can see we could push this down, which lifts that, which then releases our Atrociraptor. And although it obviously doesn't look exactly like the Atrociraptors look in Jurassic World Dominion, I think it's like the basic gist of what it would look like with, of course, a goofy kind of Imaginext type of a look. Although I will say, as far as this one goes, it's probably the least amount of skin detail when it comes to all of the figures, because we basically just have like this strange creasing kind of look that runs down the course of the figure. Same deal, even leading down into the legs. You've got, again, some pretty nice looking feet here for the dinosaur, although it doesn't really look like we have a sickle claw, and if we do, it's completely relaxed. And of course, I don't expect accuracy when it comes to like the appearance of the sickle claw in a Imaginext figure, but it definitely does not look like we have a sickle claw on it at all. We pretty much only have, as far as coloration goes, the orange tone for the body, and then a nice lighter tone of color for the underside that also ends before the tail, just like we saw on the Dimetrodon. I don't think we have an articulated jaw, no, so not really much articulation. It's probably the least amount of articulation when it comes to all of them, because on this one we really only have the legs and the arms, and that's it. Whereas the others, we did have an articulated jaw. You can see the teeth on the inside of the mouth, but that's about the best we're going to get as far as a look at those. Again, we have that kind of glass eye type of look, which I really like. This time we have kind of like a yellowish eye with a black pupil. And then, of course, I love the fact that the eyes can kind of follow you. It does kind of look like the Atrociraptor, again, from Dominion, but it's just not really all that great. Doesn't really have an action feature, missing the sickle claw, and doesn't have an articulated jaw. So out of the 3 figures we have here, this one here would definitely be the weakest of all. Now when it comes to the action features of each of these figures, for the Atrociraptor, again, probably the most boring of all, because we simply just do this, and now our Atrociraptor is loose. So there's not really much going on when it comes to the Atrociraptor and its action feature, and in fact the figure itself completely lacks an action feature, unlike the other 2. And then the capture gear, although pretty cool, again, something kids will definitely like, but it's not really that great as far as the action feature goes. Then we have the Pyroraptor, and I think the Pyroraptor will probably be a little cooler, so let's check that out. So we definitely just pop that open. So that explains the articulation. So we have our Pyroraptor there. We push the button, and it pops that right off. And now he's loose and angry, mouth open, ready to bite. It doesn't actually knock the capture gear completely off of the figure. Maybe if we go crazy, it actually sits on there really nicely. Like, it really attaches quite beautifully. But it definitely is a little bit more fun than the Atrociraptor. And then the Dimetrodon, we of course have the button here to extend the sail. And that just completely launches that capture gear far out of the frame here. Like, that really got rid of it. So that one works very nicely, and that one I think kids will definitely enjoy, because that had some pretty good force to send that capture gear flying off like that. As far as a size goes, for each of these, and I'm only really worried about sizes for the dinosaurs, not so much like the Atrociraptor capture gear. But for the Atrociraptor, you're looking at about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters. And then for a height, about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. For the Dimetrodon, about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And then for a height, the highest point is definitely the sail. A little over, actually, I would say about 2 3/4 inches or 7 centimeters, probably approaching that area. And then for the Pyroraptor, you are looking at about the 6 3/4 inch range, or about 17 centimeters, somewhere in that vicinity. And then height-wise, about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Imaginext figures. And you can definitely see, again, they pretty much stay right in the same size range as the older figures did when it comes to this kind of size range. There was an Allosaurus, a Bumpy, and I believe it was a Pteranodon that I had reviewed a ways back. And this is that same style figure where they're like the smaller versions of the Imaginext line. And I really don't think we need to do too many size comparisons or anything like that, because if you are familiar with the Imaginext line, you'll probably have a pretty good idea of the size of these. And if you are in general a collector of the Jurassic line, then hopefully these figures here in comparison will help you out. So these Imaginext Jurassic World Dominion figures are pretty fun, but they're not amazing. The best one, in my opinion, is definitely the Pyroraptor, just because it looks so cool, has some pretty fun feather detail. I like the coloration on it, even though it's not exactly what we see on the Pyroraptor in the film. It still looks fun, and the Pyroraptor has probably the coolest capture gear, as well as one of the most fun action features. And as a whole, I think it's pretty nicely sculpted for what it is, and definitely is the flashiest of the bunch. The Dimetrodon, although not really looking much like the Dimetrodon from Jurassic World Dominion, is still pretty fun. It's probably, I would kind of say it's probably my least favorite of the ones here as far as the sculpts go, because I feel like it's weird with the ridges down the back and the point on the nose and everything. I'm not a big fan of that, but it does have probably the most fun action feature out of all of these, because that sail pops out of there really nicely and really launches the capture gear. So the Dimetrodon, although the sculpt isn't my favorite, I like the color and I like the actual action feature included within, as well as the capture gear. And Atrociraptor, which is one of my favorite dinosaurs coming for the Jurassic World Dominion film. The coloration, there's not really too much to it, but then again, it's an Imaginext figure, there usually isn't, so it's kind of like your standard when it comes to that. But the lack of an action feature on this, and the capture gear being kind of boring on this one, really, I think, takes away from the figure as a whole. Not saying it's a bad release, but it's just not as exciting as the others. So if you are a collector of the Imaginext line, then these are 3 pretty fun releases. If you're not, then I would say the best one to pick up would probably be the Pyro Raptor. Regardless, if you are interested in them, make sure you check your local Walmart, as that's where I found mine. Pick them up if you can, find them, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.